So today I'm going to be talking about the hovercraft's impact on the coefficient of friction, discussion and conclusion, and I'll be discussing the applications of this technology and how we can research it further into the future. Okay, so some applications of this technology would be, first of all, lower CO2 emissions, because by using a hovercraft, you're reducing the amount of friction on a surface, which means the vehicle and the engines are doing less work to move the vehicle across the surface, which results in less energy used and hence less CO2 used. The second application is to reduce wear on roads and the environment, because since the vehicle is above the road or the natural habitat or whatever, it won't directly come in contact with it, which means it will reduce the wear. The third implication of this kind of technology is if it was implemented into racing, sharper turns would potentially be possible because you don't have to worry as much about the friction on the ground. The fourth application of this is that potentially you could produce goods faster in factories because you'd be able to eliminate some of the heat that comes from having a high amount of friction. Also, a better understanding of the factors that affect the coefficient of friction will help scientists learn how to use air to our advantage and how to avoid high amounts of friction, which can be our enemy a lot of the time, because friction equals heat. Does this back up prior research? So when looking for prior research that supported what we found, it was quite difficult because, as you can see, there are many different surfaces that we were testing. So the wooden bench top, the metal bench top, the concrete. And so we're testing those with the rubber or plastic skirt of the bottom of the hovercraft. So we're comparing two surfaces and then finding the coefficient of friction for those, which is also being affected by the air, which means we couldn't actually find research that was directly the same as ours because there are so many options that can be tested. However, the gist of the coefficient of friction being lowered by using a hovercraft, which was what we were testing for, was backed up by prior research. So, investigating this technology further into the future, some things we could test for would be how voltage or weights impact the coefficient of friction of the hovercraft on the surfaces, because changing these factors could influence it. We could also test for how increasing the speed that the hovercraft is traveling at would influence it. The impacts of a fan, so making it turn certain ways, could also be tested. So there are many further investigations we could carry out to test for other impacts on the coefficient of friction. And as always, thank you for watching this presentation.